Okay, this is going to be a little bit different, this video. It has to do with my book, but I'm not going to read a chapter. This is me discovering something that makes me really, really happy. Up until, well, yesterday, I had to do some rewriting yesterday because chapter 5 was incomplete. And I had to rewrite the second half of chapter 5. I mean, I had it in written form, but it was typed out, and I didn't like what it was. So I rewrote the second half of chapter 5, which I read. It's on YouTube. But going to chapter 6. Okay, chapter 5. Now this is probably a rare glimpse into story creating. If for people who don't write, or people who do write, maybe, I don't know, just to see how other people create. Chapter 6 used to be this remarkably boring chapter. Okay, you have Galen at the Temple of the Seeker Elves in chapter, what is it, 4? And he's in the temple, and there's the sounds of wind chimes, and you have the sounds, the smells, you know, different kinds of smells. It's all very soothing and comforting and everything. And then chapter 5, you have Avalar, the giant, rescuing the little boy from the predicament by the river. Okay, so you've got 2 really nice chapters. And then the chapter that came after, that would have been my chapter 6, I remember it vaguely. It involved Galen after he left the Seeker Elves temple, and he was trying to, you know, get through crowds of people, and he's afraid of people. He's afraid of, he's never been around people, so he's like, you know, really freaking out because he's around all these people. And then Galen gets discovered by Tarek, and Tarek more or less rescues him from the town, and gets him, you know, puts him in a, anyway, it's all very, you know, it's like, and I think chapter 6 I got into getting provisions for the army, and maybe a few new recruits, and I remember wagons with hay, and they were taking them up. Anyway, it was all very, very uneventful, the original chapter 6. Before I stopped writing, and we're talking like 10 years ago, so I'm trying to remember now, and it's a distant memory, I decided that chapter 6 was absolutely the most boring chapter in the entire book, and I didn't want it there. So I took it out. The whole chapter 6 went gone, and I don't know exactly what was on my mind. I just knew that there needed to be something that wasn't boring at this point in the story. And I think shortly after I put down what I did to replace the old chapter 6, that was about when the computers crashed. My laptop and my desktop, kind of within a week of each other, crashed. And anyway, so now here I am 10 years later, and I just finished reading the chapter with Avalar rescuing the child, and I go to chapter 6. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the story at all. As the men faded from his vision, Galen flailed through silver mist. Tendrils of fog numbed his throat, paralyzing his vocal cords. A chill voice whispered through his skull. It was the presence he'd run to as a child, cling to with all his might. It was the soul of his father living on within the staff. It had to be. Why else would it care? Anyway, so reading forward, he's in the middle of a battle on a hill. And the battle is happening close to where Meredith, the town, is, which is where the temple was that he just visited. There's this huge freaking battle, and he's having this. This is all happening. And it's like, what? Seriously? Wait a minute. How did he get here? All these questions, and it's like none of it's explained. It's just a battle right now, right here. And all I can think is I had this great battle scene in my head, and I put it down on paper as my possible replacement of the chapter 6 that was so boring, right? I put it down on paper, and then I never went back to it. So it's not, it's more like an idea that I put down, and then I never went back to it. So 10 years later, I come across this, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? It doesn't flow with the rest of the story. It completely doesn't work with what I have done so far. So, the point of my video, are you still able to write after 10 years? And when I say 10 years, I think it's actually been longer than that. I haven't really written anything. I've had no creativity. I've had no desire to write anything for a really long time. Can I still write? I mean, I managed to kind of sort of get chapter 5 okay, but I had a lot of stuff to work with. I had bits and pieces from the original chapter 5, the second part, that I used, and I kind of filled in with new stuff. This is an entirely different thing. Chapter 6 needs a whole bunch of actual brand spanking new writing to merge this idea that I just threw down on paper, right? Just doesn't. I need to be able to merge that into what I have, into the story. It needs to actually flow into the rest of the story. So I just wrote today. This is right spanking new writing that I just did today, and I'm kind of happy right now because I don't think it's half bad, which makes me think I can still write. 10 years later, haven't really written, I can still write. I don't think you lose it with writing. Like, if you don't play an instrument. If you play an instrument, like I used to play the viola, and I had not played the viola for 20 years, and I decided, you know what, I kind of want to play. I want to get myself a viola, and I want to go back to playing my viola. So, this is true. I'm not using it. This is example. This is really true. About a year ago, I bought a viola, thinking I could just pick it up and play. After 20 years. No. I was able to tune it. I was able to do, scales. That's about it. I don't remember how to play. And I played that viola in about 6 years. I played viola. But I don't remember how to play. It's not the same. I think with writing, it's a little bit different. I think once you learn how to write, it's not something you lose. And in fact, I think the longer you live and the more life experiences you have and the more you learn about how people tick, what makes people tick and stuff, you learn lessons in life, you can incorporate that into your writing, and actually, even if you're not writing every single day, you can actually be a better writer 10 years later than you were when you were writing, if that makes any sense. So this is just, I just wanted to share this. This is not, chapter 6 is not ready to be read yet, but I just wanted to share what I wrote just today, we're working on getting to the point where the scene is that I wrote 10 years ago. We're trying to make the scene into something that is actually coherent and fits with the rest of the book. So this is what I wrote today. Viewed from a distance, the town Meredith glittered like black steel links laid out before a glistening crystal pendant. The pendant, the temple of the seeker elves, towered above the modest homes and shops of the little town, outshone even the jagged peaks of the majestic mountains beyond it. Galen sighed as he braced himself against his staff, against wind buffeting him where he stood upon a hill more than a league away. Just a few scant hours ago he had been inside that temple, walking barefoot with Everov the elf along its pristine halls, oblivious completely from the peril tightening its jaws around Meredith. The sudden appearance of Tarek on his plunging black horse below the steps of the temple, then the wild, frenzied ride into the hills, had shocked from Galen any lingering benefits he'd gained from the temple's quiet tranquility. "We ride to battle," Tarik had shouted as he reached down a hand to help Galen up behind the saddle. Together they had ridden hunched over the racing horse, while above their heads, wheeling in the sky, 2 winged Wielerman scouts screeched and dove to claw at them, their faces and shapes human, but not. At least 20 men from Meredith had joined Tarik's small army, or so it had seemed to Galen as Tarik threaded his lathered horse Ebony through their shouting ranks. Bonfires had been lit within the hollow between 2 adjacent hills. Wielermen loathed fire, Tarik had explained to Galen. The fierce golden light was meant to draw like moths to flame the enemy from the town and into what Tarik hoped would be a trap, one that would allow his men higher up on the hills to rush down upon the magic-warped humans and attack. From the town, Galen heard a bell ringing. Meredith's streets were deserted now, its fearful people huddled in their homes. The crystalline gem atop Mornius flared bright blue beside him. A stranger's voice entered his head, wove itself vaguely among his own thoughts. "Galen, I am with you." Galen raised his hand and rubbed at his eyes. Pressure mounted at his temples. He felt the sickness roil in his gut that often assailed him at these times when the voice touched him from the staff. He shrugged his blue cloak forward over his arms and pressed its warm folds against his aching chest. Before him the sun began settling itself in pillows of blazing pinks and reds behind the black silhouette of the mountains. The enemy waited in the distant trees between the town and its fields, waited for the cloak of darkness, and now here it obligingly came, shadows of early twilight marching slowly across the hilly terrain. This battle would be different, Galen thought, his hands tingling with dread. This time Tarik wanted Mornius to kill. So that's what I have so far, and then after that we're back in the middle of this battle. So I still have some work to do to combine this little bit that I just wrote with that. But at least we have placed Galen. Clearly he is still by the town Meredith, because that wasn't obvious before. We have an explanation of how he got to be away from Meredith, up on a hill. You know, suddenly he's way far away from Meredith, and there was no explanation to how he got there. You know, I'm describing a little bit more the backdrop of the scene that's about to happen. I mean, so people can picture, you know, what's going on. Anyway, the point of sharing this little bit is it makes me encouraged, because I honestly did not know if I could still write after all this time. I was worried. And I read this little bit that I just wrote, and I'm like, this is as good as some of the better stuff that I wrote 10 years ago. I don't think I've lost it at all. I think, in fact, I might even be a little bit better than I was 10 years ago, and I'm not trying to be, false modesty is not something that I do. I think I still know how to, I can still write on par with what I need to be able to write to do this book justice. So I wanted to share that. I'm excited. This gives me a lot of hope for my book. The fact that I also sat here for the last 2 hours and worked on this and wrote it, again, it gives me hope. I feel like, it's not just that I can still write, it's that I have the creativity in me to be able to write, to be able to make these paragraphs. I haven't had any creativity in me for a really long time. This really gives me hope. And I wanted to share that. So this isn't really me reading a chapter. This is me saying, holy shit, I still have what it takes to write this book. It's kind of a good feeling. So anyway, just wanted to share. If you've been watching, thank you. Bye.